Hey, it's Tuesday. I always forget to. We're going to fade this out. Welcome to AMA with LCJ. It is an opportunity for us to get to chat and talk about leadership. This is going to be a little bit different. If you catch me looking over to the side, is because I've actually added. Hold on here. I'm going to finish a post. Full transparency, y'all. I forgot to post this to another platform. I'm trying this out with YouTube. So it's going to be a fun, not YouTube. I've been on YouTube. What am I thinking about? Instagram. So I'm actually live right now on my Instagram feed as well. So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. But today, oh, okay. Oh, okay. It said you couldn't hear me. I was nervous. Okay, it said it was you. Okay, all good. So live on Insta. So I'm gonna see how this works out with across all the platforms. But today will be an experiment. So if you see me interacting potentially sometimes with different platforms, it's because I'm trying out a couple of things. But today I'm excited. We're gonna be talking about is perfection holding back your leadership. Now here's the deal. If you were to ask me, I'd say a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, in my leadership journey. Well, actually, I'd even say before that, right? Because I've led teams, volunteer, paid, like the whole nine, right? If you were to ask me if I struggle with perfectionism, I probably would tell you no, because my idea of what I thought perfection was off, right? Like most people, when they think about perfectionism, especially when it pertains to leadership or leading a team, is we think about I have to have this in the exact spot at this exact time, or hey, like I don't have I need to have an email exactly look this way, right? If it's not perfect, can't make any mistakes. And what I've learned over time is I actually do struggle with perfectionism. It just looks different. And this is why I want to talk about it is why is perfection holding back your leadership is because perfectionism is pervasive, but it can also be obscure to see in yourself as a leader. And there's a very fine line, I think, between excellence and perfection and how you balance the two. So one of the things I want to hop right in and talk about is let's talk about progress over perfection. So those of you who are watching, I just want to know, drop it in the chat. I can see everything that you all are putting in the chat. How many of you all struggle with perfectionism? Or maybe you say, hey, actually, I'm good. I want to know in the chat if you struggle with perfectionism. I know at least for me, let me know I'm not alone in this, because we're going to talk a little bit about like this idea of progress over perfection. So I want to hear from you if this is something that you maybe struggle with a bit or not. I'd be interested to hear. So don't be shy, drop it in the chat so we can have meaningful conversation around it. So when we talk about like really, let's look at how I would frame this question, right? The question is like, what does the phrase progress over perfection mean to you in the context of leadership? What does the phrase progress over perfection mean to you in the context of leadership? All right. Jess said maybe. Maybe was her answer. Maybe. I'll take it. I'll take it. She said maybe. Now here's the deal. What does progress over perfection mean? This is what this actually means to me, especially in the working inner workings of leadership. It really is about being okay with continuous improvement and meaningful achievements, right? And I think oftentimes we get, especially as leaders, we get too attached to the end result. And as a result, we can lose sight of this continuous improvement, right? James Clear, you guys know how much I love the book Atomic Habits. If you've watched any of my lives, I consistently talk about that book. But one of the things he talks about is this 1% better. And as you are thinking throughout your day, as you're looking at your team, as you're looking through how you're working as a leader, are you getting 1% better every day? That's what it is. And what's really cool about it is in even in the book Atomic Habits, James Clear, he talks about this idea of kind of progress, right? Like, how do you build these towards that? If you got 1% better every single day, that 1% compounds, and you will look up by the end of the year, you will have gotten 37% better. But here's the catch. Here's the catch. Even if you got 1% worse every day, it is nearly like it's a fractional piece where you actually decline. So all of the upside is on the 1% better. And so as leaders, as we're framing this conversation around perfectionism, I want us to really think about what does this look like for us as it pertains to continuous improvement and meaningful achievements when we talk about progress. Okay. So that hope that kind of frames out the first bit of piece of the puzzle here. Um Now, one of the things that we're going to talk about are what are some of these I want to start actually here, okay? Which is how can leaders identify and overcome the pitfalls of perfectionism in their leadership style? So, how can leaders identify and overcome the pitfalls of perfection in their leadership style? So, get your pen and paper ready because we're going to talk about a couple of pitfalls that may not always look like perfectionism, but they show up. Okay. So, we're going to do top five. Okay. Number one. All right. Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to reverse. Here we go. Number one, frequent overworking. Frequent overworking. Regularly working long hours or expecting team members to do the same in order to meet exceedingly high standards or to be perfect in a project. Overworking can be a disguise of perfectionism because I just got to do this one more thing. I just got to do this. I just like, I'm going to spend an extra hour here to make sure that it's perfect, right? Overworking. Okay, I see you. T Turner says, "Lord help me." I love it. Right? Okay, that's it, right? Overworking. That's number 1. Okay, you ready? Number 2. Number 2. Now this one is tricky. I'm telling you right now, this one's tricky. Number 2, setting unrealistically high standards. Unrealistically high standards, which means that now how do you know if it's unrealistic or not? Setting or establishing goals or standards that are exceptionally high or unattainable, which can lead to excessive pressure and demotivation among your team. Let me help you with this one. Okay. This is particularly for my type A or all A, super A students who like go hard in the paint every single day. I'm that leader. Okay. So I'm going to put myself in this category. Setting unrealistically high standards. Okay. Those of us, and I'm actually going to talk specifically to those who are in underrepresented groups, Black women, women, in this category, we are taught to work twice as hard. Right. And so as a result of that, sometimes we set these unrealistic expectations that everybody has to work as hard as us, for us, with us, the way we worked to get where we are. Right. And in the process of that, it starts to permeate. Right. So you're not like I think one of the hardest lessons I had to learn as a leader is not everybody I'm leading is going to work like I worked. I love working. I sometimes probably love working too much. And so as a result of that, I kind of wanted to carry that over at times into my team. And then I started setting unrealistically high standards towards the team. So that's number 2, right? Number 1, frequent overworking. Number 2, setting unrealistically high standards, right? Progress over perfection. So that's number 2. Okay. Number 3, avoiding risk taking. Now, I like to do what we call like what's the word? Like I like to take calculated risk. I'm naturally a risk taker, right? Like for me, probably if you were to ask some of my senior leaders who have led me, they probably like, you're too much of a risk taker. I love a good disruption and taking risks, but perfectionist leaders might avoid new initiatives or innovative approaches due to fear of failure or making mistakes, potentially stifling creativity and growth. So, what is your risk tolerance? How many of you all here who are watching live know and understand your risk tolerance? It's a good question. Have you ever thought about like, hey, how do I handle risk? D Am I a risk taker at all? You have to know this about yourself as a leader, right? Because if you there are times where it's important to take those calculated risks to move forward. There I'll put it to you this way. As a leader, even as an individual contributor, as I'm trying to make these moves and these leaps in my career, a lot of risk has paid off for me. So you've got to figure out where that healthy tolerance is for risk because you need that to kind of start to propel forward in some shape, form, or fashion at times. As technology is evolving, you know how y'all I love my love affair with AI, right? With technology in general as the enabler of innovation and creativity, typically those who are not big risk takers because technology breaks. And so what I find a lot of times is leaders who struggle with adopting technology can sometimes probably maybe be hidden in a just a hint of perfectionism because we want technology to always work and technology is not going to always work. But sometimes it actually works better than people, right? So there's that. So that's another one. Are you avoiding risk taking? You don't want to take a risk because you're afraid of failure. Or are you afraid of success? Either way. Okay. Here's another one. All right. This is number 4. I think I'm on number 4. All right. Let me know in the chat if you're with me. Those of you all who are watching on LinkedIn, if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, any of the things, let me know. Chime in if this is resonating at all with you. Um, Number 4. Okay. Actually, number 4 and number 5 to me are very closely related, but I also want to make sure that like as we're talking through this, that you keep both of these in mind. I would tie them between the two. Okay. So the top one, number 4. Here we go. Number 4 is, you know what's so funny? I'm sitting here talking to you all. I'm like, did I count up or did I count down in telling you these 5 things? I don't remember. Bless it. Okay, here we go. Struggling with decision making. So procrastination or indecision, right? Often due to fear of making the wrong choice or not achieving a perfect outcome. If you struggle with decision making, this is another hidden thing around perfectionism in leaders. You don't want to make the wrong decision. So I've got great news for you, okay? For those of you all who struggle with indecision, I'm about to blow your mind, okay? You ready? When you make a decision as a leader, you are either 2 things. You are either right or wrong. Like that's it. Right? That's it. Those are your 50-50. You have 50-50. Now, what happens is sometimes research and understanding what we do, what we're looking at when we're trying to make a decision can give us better odds that we're going to look into the fact that we may be right. However, you could still be wrong. That last little 20% of the piece of the decision that you were missing, but you made a decision, ended up being the wrong decision, right? You're like, oh, I shouldn't have did that. Yeah. I mean, you only had 2 outcomes. You're either going to be right or you're going to be wrong. So as leaders, you can't be afraid of decision making. What I've learned here's what I've learned as a leader. There have been times I've made the wrong decision. I've made the wrong decision about a project. I've made a wrong decision about hiring someone or who should lead a project. Like I've made wrong decisions before as a leader. The key to decision making, right, and moving past perfectionism is knowing and recognizing where you went wrong and then correcting it as fast as possible. That's it. If you are worried, you're so worried about making a mistake as a leader and making the wrong decision, then you're going to burn your team out and you're going to burn yourself out in the process. Because there's nothing worse than being in a holding pattern as a leader. I like to call like indecisive leaders reluctant leaders. Don't be a reluctant leader. You've got to be able to take the information that you do have, figure out what's the best route forward, make a decision based on that, and then move forward confidently or mostly confidently. And if you're wrong, your job as a leader is to pivot, figure out what went wrong, to remedy it and then move forward. That's the crux of it, right? And so oftentimes being a leader doesn't mean that you're always right. Being a leader means that you have enough information and you've shown and displayed enough we'll say acumen in leadership, right? You've displayed the characteristics that the company and your leaders feel confident that you can lead a team. And in the process of you, they're going to rely on you to make the decision. There's not a single leader that has ever gone through the history of time who's not made a wrong decision. I'll give you a great example. Like I can give you a few. Like how many of you all remember Microsoft Zune? I think it was called a Zune. So Microsoft at the time, actually I think Dell had an MP3 player, I think Microsoft had an MP3 player right when things were popping, right? Technology was it was going, okay? It was going, humming. And then the iPod came out. So now Apple, when Windows, was making a stronghold, Apple comes out, was like, boom, we got this thing called an iPod. You put your music in it, people walk around and listen. There's decision making behind all of this, right? And they go all in on the culture, like they build it in. And then you've got some of these other companies that are trying to compete with Apple in this space. Somebody had to make a decision to say, yes, we're actually going to create a project and we're going to manufacture all of these MP3 players and try to put it out to market. That was a leader's decision. Those products no longer exist. So then a leader also had to make a decision to turn back and go. So this is where you can't be afraid of this. Wrong decisions happen all the time. If if you struggle to make decisions, I would challenge you if I were coaching you to say you probably struggle with perfectionism. And you've got to figure out, and there are different frameworks that can help you go down the decision making path, right? And you've got to figure out which one of those works for you, which one of them doesn't, and then go from there. But I highly, highly, highly recommend that you give yourself a deadline. If you got a decision to make and you struggle, like, okay, I'm going to spend this amount of time researching. After I research, I'm gonna give myself till tomorrow at 5 o'clock to make this decision. Give yourself that. Okay. Like that's kind of the other one. All right. Now this is my favorite one now. Let me know if this is resonating with you. I want to hear from you. Don't be shy. If you put it in the comments, I can actually see it all. If you're watching on LinkedIn, doesn't matter if you're watching on LinkedIn, um, Facebook, any of the things, I can see your comments. So I want to hear from you. What questions do you have around perfectionism or perfection in leadership? What's holding you back? I want to be able to answer these questions live for you. All right. Number one. All right. We're down to number one, or technically five, whichever way I counted. It's the fifth thing. This one, hold on. Hold on to your keyboard and your mice, or your mouse in this case. I was thinking about all of you at the same time, right? Hold on to your keyboard and mouse. Number five, if you struggle with delegating, you likely are teetering in the perfectionism space. Okay. If you struggle with delegating, you are likely falling into this trap. Okay. What does this look like? So when you are working through tasks, right? So if you are reluctant to delegate, actually, let me rewind. If you have difficulty, man, all of these D's are like messing me up. Okay, here we go. If you have difficulty delegating, right? Let's define that. That means that you typically have a reluctance to delegate tasks as a result of that. And so what happens is if you are struggling to delegate tasks, it means that you're likely worried that it won't be done perfectly or as you would do it unless you do it yourself. The result of this is burnout. The result of this is decreased team autonomy. Hardest thing as a leader, you know, I believe that a piece or a portion of this, right? When we're leading, right? And we're and perfectionism and like because everything we talked about, it's very elusive, right? And one of the hardest things was as a leader, especially now, right? More companies are having leaders almost be individual contributors and leading a team. So you're doing a ton of work and you're responsible for people's careers and progressions and all the things. And it's becoming harder to be a leader, especially in the middle of an organization. Okay. And so what happens is when we don't delegate, your team doesn't grow, you don't grow, everybody burns out in the process. Delegation is necessary. And so sometimes we don't want to delegate as leaders because it's like they're not going to do it how we want to do it. One of the ways as leaders that you can get better at this, at delegating, is get better at coaching. I said it. As a leader, you have to be a good coach. And the more you get better at like being able to give feedback and coaching, and you feel strong and confident about feedback and coaching, the easier it becomes to delegate. See how that works? See how I put all of those pieces of the puzzle together, right? Great book, Crucial Conversations. If you haven't read it, read it. If you've read it, read it again. Learn to get really, really good at coaching and feedback. The better you get at coaching and feedback, the easier it becomes to delegate. Because when you give somebody something and they don't do it to the standard in which you need them to, you know how to give coaching and feedback in a way that like sometimes it feels good, sometimes it's going to be what it's going to be, but now you're confident in your communication styles and how you're going to communicate that to the team. Hope that's helping somebody, right? Sometimes we don't delegate because we know we have to give feedback and we don't like to sometimes give feedback. I'll just do it myself. I can just do it myself. I can just do it faster. True, you probably could do it faster. But there are times when I've delegated something to somebody on my team, and not only did they figure out a better way to do it, they started to exceed me in that thing. You don't know what's hidden in your team. You don't know what talents are hidden in your team if you're not looking for ways to delegate. Because typically, when you're delegating things, right, you know who has the bandwidth to be able to, who has the capacity to take on something else, and you give it to them. You know the time frame, you know where everything's going to land. So as a result of that, if you give it to them, they probably have more time than you to dedicate to the task. And sometimes they're able to figure things out that you couldn't about the task. And now you're moving further ahead in the performance of your team overall. Because sometimes you just don't have the time. I hope this is making sense. Let me know. Those of you all who are watching, once again, thank you for watching. I always appreciate it. If you're listening back as well, thank you. If you're live, drop in some questions. I want to answer questions, real questions that you may have around anything around leadership and the topic that we're discussing today. I want to be able to answer them live and make it as interactive as possible. So if you have a question, don't be shy. Drop it in the comments section. I will see it and I'll be sure to answer if you're watching this live. All right. So, here's what I'll say. I hope those things helped. So now we know and understand what are some ways that what is this mindset around progress over perfection? Okay. We've also really talked about we've talked about really what are some of the pitfalls of perfectionism in your leadership style. This particular question I really like as we're talking about perfection and if it's holding you back from your leadership, because this is a really tough balance. So the question is, how do you balance the need for quality and excellence with the understanding that perfection is unattainable? How do you balance the need for quality and excellence with the understanding that perfection is unattainable? Great question. Love this question. So one of the things that one of my pillars when I was leading the team, right? And I'm gonna put like a shameless plug in here. Uh, when I first got my team, or anytime I'm like leading a team, the very first thing that I do is vision. What is the vision for my team? How is this going forward? And so one of the things that I'm doing is in February, I am launching the Ignite Leadership Masterclass. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about, stay with me. I'm going to go somewhere with this. In the Ignite Leadership Masterclass, we're going to be talking about vision. That's one of the very first things we're going to talk about is vision casting as a leader. And one of the things for my team, for me as a vision for my team, was operating with the spirit of excellence. And I used to tell my team all the time, I don't expect perfection, I expect excellence, right? And so if you're interested, I'm dropping it in the chat here for everybody to click on it. If you want to set up a call with me, I'm doing these kind of just to explore, just to help you kick off the year right. They are these, I'm doing some discovery calls, leadership momentum calls is what I'm calling them. But we're going to chat. We just hop on and say, hey, like, how can how can I help you? Uh, sorry about that, y'all. Um, I tell you, you gotta love the you gotta love how tools. This is a great example of perfectionism, right? Sometimes tech is tech. I had to go to another window to drop that in. One of the things that I talked about a lot was this excellence versus perfection. It was a vision that I had for my team. So in the Ignite Leadership Masterclass that's going to be kicking off in February, sign up. Let's have a conversation. It's a leadership momentum call. It really is just a conversation to discover like, what are some tips or what are some things that can really propel you forward for the year. Those calls are free. They're 30 minutes. And I'm excited to be able to offer that to anybody who wants to sign up. It's a it's a great time. We just get together. I understand what's going on in your world and going from there. If you're interested, also just in the Ignite Leadership Masterclass, that's kicking off in February. It's beta, so it's closed, right? It's a small group that I'm only accepting a certain amount of people in. This is going to be key in that, and so I'm saying all that to say, book a discovery call, a leadership momentum call. We can have a conversation. If nothing else, you'll come away. You will absolutely leave with some tips and ideas of things you can do to move yourself forward. Either way, okay? Um, Now back to, let's talk about this balance of excellence versus perfectionism, which is unattainable. When we talk about the vision for your team and setting a vision for your team, okay? My vision for my team was excellence, not perfection. Excellence really is about how you approach the work and what that looks like. I'm not looking for the team to be perfect. What I am looking for is, did that person give their best effort? Did they go in and research? Did you get all the stakeholders in? Excellence really is about how you approach the work and then how do you deliver the work. It's not necessarily if the work was A every single time. It'd be great if it's A work every single time, but sometimes, when I was leading a team, sometimes when it got to me, it was probably B work. And then I had to coach them to A work. Sometimes it was C work, and I'd be like, ugh. And it may take 2 or 3 times to get them to A. And over time, you start to really learn how to, like, each individual person, what gets them up to that. But if they're afraid to try and make effort because, perfectionism is like a silent it's like a silent creeper tone that you set for your team, then that becomes an issue. I used to say all the time, excellence, not perfection. They know, like, they knew that about me and they could recite it as well. How often are you saying and explaining what your vision is for the team? My pastor at my church, he says vision leaks. And so I talk about vision all the time. And talking even about vision all the time helps keep me vision focused on what my team is and how to deliver with excellence, not perfection. Keeps everybody in alignment. But how often are you talking about what the vision is for the team, how you want them to show up? all of this helps negate perfectionism. It's reminders for everybody, right? Vision for my team was radical transparency. That was a vision that I had for my team. Authenticity, right? Enthusiasm, being present. These are all things that were visions that I set for my team. And so because of that, perfectionism didn't have room to creep in as much. I won't say at all, but it had less space to maneuver and operate. I hope that makes sense. Let me know if this is resonating with you. Okay, I got a question. Okay, Jessica says time is a limiting factor in trying to coach my team. Any techniques you can offer to help with delegation and coaching to enhance your leadership skills? Great question. Time. Time is always, there's never enough of it, right? As leaders, you can go in and you can say, hey, today I don't have any meetings, right? Let's play this out. Today I don't have any meetings. I used to be like, oh, it's a light meeting day. I feel like you should just never say it's a light meeting day because then it ends up being the opposite, right? So you come in, you got light meeting day, you're like, oh yeah, this is gonna be the day that I get everything done. And then you come in and you may get a couple things done and you got fire here, fire here, fire here, fire here, put those out, and you look up and it's 6 o'clock. So to answer your question, my question would be is hold on. It's coming. It's forming. Hold on. I've got to snatch it back out of the ethers because my mind went to Z and I need to go back to A. When you're asking the question about time is a limiting factor in trying to coach your team, how do you get better at delegating and coaching? My question is, how much time are you setting aside for deep work and thinking? The only way that you know what you can delegate is if you know all the pieces of the puzzle that are on the board. Doesn't mean you have to do all the pieces of the puzzle. And so I think of it this way. Um, let's just say we've got a toy swing set, right? And we've got to put this toy swing set together. And I've got 3 or 4 people to help me put this toy. I mean, this is going to be like the mother load of all swing sets. It's got screws and parts in wood and all of these different things, right? And I'm going to just lay it out in my backyard. Now, I have 3 helping hands, but what happens is if this person says, "Hey, I'm gonna do the wood stuff, I'm gonna do the screw thing, I'm gonna do," right? You still may not necessarily be able to come together cohesively as a team. As a leader, what happens is I can say, "Okay, hey, actually, let's do this. First, let's spread out all the parts. What is all the work?" I understand all the work of my team, all the work I'm doing. I try to find ways to create, you have to audit this stuff. This is the stuff nobody wants to do, but it's important that you audit, right? Who has bandwidth, who doesn't? What does this look like? Are you setting aside time to take a step back and say, okay, we're building this swing. Let me look at the instructions. Or are you kind of day to day, kind of like how I like to put stuff together? I'd be like, this looks like this goes here. This looks like this goes here. And somewhere along the way, you end up having to undo something somewhere because you didn't stop. How do you find the time to delegate? You have to know what pieces are on the board. And in order to do that, you have to make time. I do not believe when most leaders tell me, because I used to coach, in the corporate world, I'd be talking to a leader, we'd have a one on one, we'd chat, they'd ask me about time and time management. There's never enough time. You have to make time. If you don't have enough time to figure out how to delegate, you're likely not delegating enough. As a leader, you're paid to think and strategize, like, right? You're going to still have some things where you have to keep your hands in, but every time I find myself doing something, how I got better at it was I started to ask myself, should I be doing this? Is there somebody else on my team? And a few weeks ago, I can't, I don't have it anymore, and I didn't connect my iPad today. But in this matrix, right? In this matrix of things, you have to ask yourself, do I personally have to do it? Do I personally have, is nobody else on my team can do this? If the answer is yes, then that's probably something you can't delegate. If it's something that you could teach somebody to do, take the time to teach it and eventually hand it off, right? As leaders, in part of this delegation and coaching piece of the puzzle, what leaders don't know is the more that you delegate, the faster you can run. The more you delegate, the faster you can run. The more you delegate, because like my favorite part of like being a leader was like problem solving and being innovative and creative. And like some people are like, well, that's not necessarily like my thing. You'd be amazed. It doesn't matter what job it is that you have and how what type of work you do. As leaders, you see things that other people can't. But if you don't give yourself enough time to get that 10,000-foot view, you're not going to know where you can delegate, how you can delegate, and then you're not necessarily able to really see where you can start to really utilize and grow, right? So, Jessica, I hope that answered your question, but I would say if time is a factor, you've got to find the time. Like you have to make the appointment. Just like I'll tell you all this, full transparency. One of the hardest things, right, that I struggled with was um, keeping appointments for myself. And the more I did it over time, the better I got. Here's what I know. If any of you all scheduled a meeting with a senior leader, or they scheduled a meeting with you, you would make it, right? You'd make it. You wouldn't cancel it. You wouldn't move it unless like you absolutely had to. So if your boss sets a meeting or one of your team members, or we keep meetings with other people, but didn't keep meetings with ourselves. And I used to do this all the time. I say, okay, I have this hour block. In this hour block, I'm going to focus on blah, 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 blah. And then something would come up, not urgent, maybe important. And what I would do is I wouldn't show up to my own meeting for myself because I knew it was a meeting with me. And when we don't do this as leaders, we are doing ourselves a disservice and the team a disservice. So set those meetings, figure it out, like figure out delegation, right? Decision making. If you know you've got to make a decision, if you need everything to be quiet, you do not want to be, you really want to think through this and you need thinking time, schedule that bad boy in your calendar and hold yourself to it. Do not miss appointments with yourself. I think if that is one of the biggest things that I'm learning and still learning now, when I say, as a leader, as a leadership coach, um, as an entrepreneur, again, CEO, is keeping appointments with myself. Because if we're not careful over time, we're going to go back to habits. Over time, you develop the habit of not keeping the appointment with yourself. And that's a horrible habit. And I'm not saying that just to y'all. I'm saying that to myself, right? We don't get in the habit of missing appointments with yourself. Okay? Let me know. Great question, Jessica. Let me know if you all have some other questions. I want to make sure that I have time. We've got just a little bit, just about 20 minutes left on today's live. Um I want to make sure that we figure we get these questions answered. What questions do you have around perfection and if it's holding you back as a leader? Uh, and actually, you know what? I'm going to pose a question to you all actually right now. And while I'm parsing out this next question, my question I want to ask you all, I'm going to drop it in the chat, is I want you all to share with me. Like share with me an instance where focusing on progress led to unexpected success. I want you to drop that in the chat for those of you all who are watching. I just dropped it Hold on, LinkedIn, I'm coming. Oh, you gotta love LinkedIn. I gotta do it separate there. All right. I want to hear from you. Share with me a time where focusing on progress led to unexpected success. It can be in leadership, it can be anything. I want to hear from you. And while we're doing that, um, I am let's talk. Actually, you know what? I wanna talk. I want to talk about failure. I want to talk about failure for a minute as you all are asking these questions because as we are talking about perfection holding back your leadership, I cannot not talk about failure. I know I talked about it a little bit earlier, but I want to talk about it exclusively um, before we hop off today because I just think it's necessary. So, this question is: how has past failure or shortcomings been a valuable lesson in your leadership journey? How has failure and shortcomings been a valuable lesson in my leadership journey? I think before I even talk about a potential past failure or shortcoming, I want to talk about like my mindset with failure. I think failure is a thing that I have consistently wrestled with, right? Fear of failure, fear of success, depending on what it is, right? Um, it's been something I've grappled with a lot, and I think it has a lot to do with how I'm very type A, right? Very competitive. I hate losing. I am the worst. Like I just don't like losing. If you would have saw me Saturday Sunday Cowboys game, blessed I was not happy, right? Like I do not like losing. And so coming up short or failing to a sense was like torture. Like I would just perseverate, like just I can't think about anything else about other than how I coulda, shoulda, woulda did the thing. And so when you think about like failures and shortcomings along the journey of leadership, you have to reframe how you see failure. If you don't reframe it, this is where the shortcomings come in. This is where this comes up short. If you have yet to reframe failure, leadership is going to be hard for you. Now, one of the very first things that we talk about a lot, and I think we probably hear it especially a lot in the tech space, which is failure is not final and learn to fail forward, right? Failure isn't final. And so I think for me as a leader, as I look back on like the lessons I've learned from failure is it's not final. And you're going to come up short. It's how I started to get better at responding to failure that allowed me to become a better leader. I think one of the biggest things for me even as a leader as I got better at at handling failure, I think I got better at also handling shortcomings of my team too, right? Because I knew how to handle it. I knew where to kind of push in cuz like I kind of would have like a sergeant mentality, right? I fail, I'm going to do it, keep doing it till I get it right, right? And so part of this breaking up with perfection as a leader is coming to accept that failure will be a part of the journey. One of my favorite things that I like to talk about when I'm talking with, kids, particularly kids and youth, right? I tell them the biggest lie that they were ever told was failure was not an option. I think it's one of the biggest lies ever told. You will absolutely fail your way to you will absolutely fail your way to success. It's the only way. Like literally the only way. And so you have to reframe how you look and think about failure will help you undo and untangle what is perfectionism as a leader. I'll give you all a great example. Today was not for me showing up live just wasn't a test of like progress over perfection. 1% better all wrapped into one, right? I'm so used to like, hey, if I got something, I launched something, I want it to be an immediate success right out the gate, instant gratification, crushing it out the door. That's just that's just my personality. But doing these lives, writing the newsletter, like working on building this masterclass has been the ultimate test in progress over perfection and learning to move past my fear of failure. And it's the same thing in leadership, right? Like sometimes if you become so concerned that things be like, oh my God, that mistake. I also learned sometimes what we think is the worst mistake in all of history of workingdom. I just made that up. We can make a mistake and we view it as like the greatest failure of all time. And the person who's on the receiving side of that is like, yeah, it's cool. You're like, oh my God, no, it's not. It's just it's the worst thing ever. And then like we then participate in our own public lashings of our shortcomings. And the greatest thing that I can do, the greatest um advice I can give to leaders as you're going through the process, right? Is learning to fail fast, fail forward, and understanding that failure isn't final. And the more that you do this, the less perfectionism will have a hold and will hold you back, won't be holding you back in leadership. You've got to take risks, right? You've got to delegate. You got to figure out some things. You've got to empower the team. You want to build a high performing team, you've got to make sure that perfectionism is in check. And by in check, I mean you've got to make sure that you're trying to siphon that mug out of your team, of your organization as much as possible. Give you a great example. Risk taking. I'm going to give you an example. I don't see any questions. So we're just about done today. So if you have a question, drop it in the chat. I want to make sure I answer it before I log off. But I love using the iPhone as the example of risk taking. And like, yes, Steve Jobs had a little bit of perfectionism. If you know anything about his story, he definitely was like type A excellence dude. But here's what I'll say about this. When the iPhone came out, people laughed. They're like, "You're going to turn an MP3 player into a phone?" Right? He had a team around him who believed enough in the vision of what he was doing. Right? He believed in himself, wasn't afraid of failure to take a huge leap of faith to create what now is definitely a widespread culture. Now, I will tell you, I'm Android all the way, team Android, but I respect it, right? A lot of PC people, when they came out with the iPad, tablets a fad. Tablets are a fad. Tablets aren't going away. They're not going to stay. Tablets are around. Some people use it as their primary means of as a computer, right? You've gotta be willing to take risks. You've gotta move past it. I promise you, you would be amazed to understand what is on the other side of that as a leader when you lean into it. If you lean into what it is. So, I don't see any questions. So, one of the things, um, yesterday was Martin Luther King Day, as many of you all know. Um, and I wanna share this particular quote with you, um, because I think it has a lot to tie in with today. And it has a lot to tie in with progress over perfection. Um, and I'll share this quote. I want to share this quote, but before I share this quote, I did get a question, so I want to make sure I answer that. Um, Matt says, "Why do you think so many people are afraid of risk taking on our current time? Does seeing others' success on social media affect what we think about our own performance?" Ooh, that's a really good question, Matt. So here's what I'll say. I'm going to answer the first one. First question is, why do I think so many people are afraid of risk taking right now? I do believe that there is a level of fear of risk taking because people are afraid of being judged. Nobody wants to be judged or made fun of or canceled. So I do think that social media does have a little bit to play around that, right? People don't want to fail publicly. If you failed 20 or 30 years ago and you didn't make a public declaration, it's not like you're going to be like, "Hey, New York Times, run me a print. I'm about to go do the thing." Right? There was no, I mean, maybe the people you worked with and your family may know you're gonna go after this endeavor, but nobody knew that you failed, right? And so now I think when we go after things, we don't want to put it out there or we kinda keep it close, um, because we fear judgment, right? And so I do think that seeing other people's success on social media does impact how we think about our own performance, how we think about failure, how we think about success. But here's the thing, Matt. I'm gonna put one little thing in your head. Sometimes my question back, even to myself, is if I'm afraid to take a risk because I'm afraid of failing publicly. I'm afraid of being judged. I have to ask myself, is it because I judge others? Sometimes our fear can be a mirror to what's sometimes really inside of us. I think whether we want to or not, whether we want to admit it or not, sometimes we can hold judgment against others by what we see and or hear on social media. And so therefore because we do it, we assume that other people are going to do it towards you. And I think it's not just, well, I think this phenomenon though has moved beyond just what you post on social. I think it is something now that has unconsciously creeped into everything else too. And so we're taught like, so now you want to keep everything close to the chest. As I've been building this business, this is what I'll say. As I've been building this business, putting myself out there with building this masterclass, building this business, working on showing up more on social media, I am confronted by this more and more. And what I have learned, I'm still practicing. If I'm being honest, full transparency, I'm learning and still practicing how to show up anyways. Because what uh they say, there's a saying that says success leaves clues. The clues of success show that those who do not care and do what they know to do and show up in every single piece of the way and not look back are the ones who are successful. That's the clue. And so we have to deprogram, right? Like I'll say reprogram our mind to reframe failure and this need to sometimes be liked and loved by everyone because it's just not possible. And being like, okay, I'm not for that person and I'm okay with that. And so I think your question is really profound because I think it's partly a mirror, which is why we struggle with it. And I think like, I'm gonna be honest, like, this is like, going live every Tuesday is probably one of the things that stretches me most. I did not wanna go live today, and then I sat down and started working. I was working on my newsletter this morning. I was like, "Man, this is too good not to share." Like, I hope this makes a difference for somebody, even if it's one person. And the funny thing is, I was chatting with my best friend on WhatsApp, and we were talking about something, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm the type to leave the 99 to go get the 1." I know that about myself, right? And because I know that I'm more apt and I'm more comfortable, sometimes like, "Yo, Imma leave the 99 because I gotta go make sure this 1 is okay." This live every week, it's 1. If it impacts one person, this hour and prep and everything else was worth it. And so I have to learn to like reframe my success. Some successes are going to be massive and they're going to give me quantum leaps, but I can't despise small beginnings, and I have to be okay with progress and not perfection. And one of the things that I'm actually working on doing, I was just telling another friend of mine before I went live today, I was like, I think I'm gonna start writing down how I got 1% better every day. Put a note in my notepad on my iPad and say, hey, this is how I got 1% better today. And then I'm gonna look up 30 days from now. I'm gonna look up 60 days from now. I'm gonna look up 90 days from now. I'm gonna look up 180 days from now, 365 days from today or yesterday is when I started it. And I'm gonna see how I got 1% better every day. And it's gonna reframe that and hopefully uproot a lot of struggles that I have even around perfectionism. Great question, Matt. I love this. It's a great way to actually end today's AMA with LCJ. So I loved it. Thank you for asking that. So I want to end with this. Yesterday was MLK Day. And a lot of what a lot of people talk about, even online, was really around, the social justice and the things that he's done to progress America. And I think all of that is wildly important. But here's what I'll say. There was something that there was something in him that to me made me think about today's show. So he has a quote, and then the quote says that if you can't fly, run, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving. And that's really how I think about leadership. It's how we should all show up. And I knew exactly what he was talking about in that moment, right? Like, look, I got to go after this. I know that what I'm doing is going to change the course of history. And the reality is his calling ultimately cost him his life. And so part of this undoing of perfectionism holding back your leadership, the question isn't like, hey, like, I've got to be the best leader. I'm about to be the next John C. Maxwell tomorrow in leadership. You may not be there. You may be crawling for a while, and then you're going to get to walk, and then you're going to run, and then you're going to get to fly. For me, in this whole journey, as I'm even like stretching as a leader, even though I'm not directly leading people right now, I'm coaching leaders, teaching leaders, I'm still learning. And I would be like, yeah, I may be like the wobbly baby right now. There's still so much to uncover in the process. But the goal is to keep moving forward. If you're a leader and you're not feeling confident as a leader right now, or you're aspiring leader, heck, if you're just an individual contributor watching this show and you feel like you're not up to speed, I need you to take a step back. I need you to remember that we only have to get 1% better every day, just 1%. That could be like keeping that appointment that we talked about with yourself to think and do deep work. That 1% could be like, I'm actually gonna send out 2 more emails than I intended, right? That what is this 1%? I'm gonna be okay because I'm moving forward. And so reframe it all, because the call is not perfection, it's excellence in progress. All right. That's all I have for you. We are literally at 2:59, right at time, but I just want to say thank you so much for watching, for joining me. I'll be back here tomorrow. Not tomorrow. I will not be back here tomorrow. I'll be back next week, Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. I look forward to chatting with you all. Hoping that my 1% better is dropping these topics a little bit earlier and maybe giving you opportunity to ask questions. And my Q2 goal down the line is hopefully to even have some of you all coming on here and there for live coaching. All right. That's all I have for you all today. Don't forget, book um, book your leadership momentum call today. The link is there in the chat. I'd love to connect with you and see what tips and tricks I can really help you to get you moving forward in the right direction for the year. With that being said, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next week.